hello there, YouTube. And hello, Abby Normal. Yes, I did like your little reaction to the overreaction to Disney's new princess, Brave, and the complete misinterpretation of her character. It brought this reaction is very depressingly common, but fortunately, I think, well, certainly from the British media's point of view, it evolved quite considerably up towards the. This might sound rather odd, but before the new reboot started with Doctor Who, and it's not really a reboot because everything else is in continuity. Well, actually it is, because most of the Seventh Doctor stories have been cancelled. Not the filmed ones, but the written ones. Sorry, Doctor Who's very confusing. I mean, more confusing than most comic books, so because of the time travel element. But nonetheless, before Russell T Davies decided that every flipping companion must fancy the pants off the Doctor, thank you, Russell T Davies, we had a companion like no other. We had Ace. Now, to understand Ace, you really need to understand what was happening at the time in Doctor Who. What was happening is the series had been brought back from suspension after Colin Baker's last series, The Trial of a Time Lord, which wasn't as bad as people thought it was. It just had this element of this very meta element, where the Doctor, most of the stories of that season were the Doctor reviewing what he'd done previously, and these were new stories. But the fact that he was sitting down watching them kind of confused people. Somebody called it the Doctor watches Doctor Who, which was somewhat unfair, I think. But anyway, Baker was ousted in favour of Sylvester McCoy. And yes, along with that, the previous companion, Mel, who was the first companion to have a weird time loop thingy going on, in that when Doctor met her for the first time, she'd already met him. Although that wasn't quite as confusing as the way they did it with the River Song. What they ended up with was they realised that with Mel, and definitely previously with Perry, Nicola Bryant putting on a really bad American accent from her native English, and just generally being annoying, they were constantly falling into the archetype of the screaming girl, and they didn't want to do that anymore. So, designed by committee, they came up with the anti-Doctor Who companion, Ace. Ace was a teenager from the 1980s who sort of taught herself chemistry by trial and error, and accidentally blew a hole in time and space and ended up in the 35th century on a different planet, where the Doctor picked her up. And from there, she travelled through the universe with him. And her reaction to all these monsters and aliens was never to scream or flee or anything. It was just, well, attack them.
Small human female sighted on level 3.
How are you calling small?
Under a tree, under a tree. Lieutenant Bad. Reinforcements requested.
No, that's not a fan film. That is real Doctor Who, and no, you're not hallucinating. That was Ace attacking a Dalek with a baseball bat. That is how awesome this character is. She attacks a Dalek with a baseball bat. Later on in that same episode, she also draws a bazooka on him, puts various straps bombs to them, and would you ever see any of the modern companions? I know they gave Rose that big ass gun, but that was completely out of character, so I'm just going to ignore that because they were just trying to make her like Ace, and she's not. She's pathetic. However, yes, the character was designed by committee. Yes, the character was deliberately taking the piss out of the screaming girl archetype, personified by the first sort of young female companion, the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, and later by Perry, the whiny American crazy botanist. It was actually an English actress trying to do an American accent, and it was so bad. I could not believe how bad they got the accent. Nicola Bryant made a real mess of it, and every time she opened her mouth, he wanted to strangle her. And in fact, the Sixth Doctor's immediately after having regenerated, tried to strangle her, which is what the whole... people say, oh, it's the most controversial thing that ever happened in the series. No, it's not. Everybody wanted to strangle her. Big deal. Now, with Ace, though, you have this relationship which is based on a sort of mutual friendship, more or less of equals. I don't think even Romana, who was a Time Lord, had quite the same sort of respect in the Doctor's eyes as Ace did. And that's incredible, considering she's just some random teenager from the 80s who stumbles into various loopholes of temporal engineering. And later on in the extended Seventh Doctor stories, she was actually given a TARDIS. She was actually admitted into the Time Lord Academy and then given a TARDIS of her own. That's how much respect the Doctor had for her. And when it came to personal storylines, the only one that really stood out was Curse of Fenric, because in her backstory she really hated her mother, and her mother was basically the source of all her problems. In The Curse of the Fenric, she goes back in time to 1943, I think, yes, 43. And they're at a secret code-breaking base in Scotland. Whilst they're there, there's a great big mess, and she befriends a signal operator, a young signal operator with a baby. What she doesn't realise is the signal operator is her grandma, and the baby is her mother. The baby that she loved is actually her mother, which is a massive revelation that completely freaks her out. Not only that, but she also creates something of a paradox in that she said, go to this address in London, my grandma lives there. Not realising she's speaking to her grandma, which in itself starts a lot of at that point, the Seventh Doctor has to break Ace's faith in him in order to allow this strange creature that is allergic to the idea of a sort of a strong belief or faith in anything. To break this creature out of its trance and get it to attack the villain, Fenric. And in order to do that, he makes this epic speech where he trashes her in every way he can, and saying he knew that she's a complete idiot, and has to, obviously afterwards, has to explain he needed to break her faith in him. And the only way he could do that was make this epic speech. And McCoy, of all the Doctors, is probably best known for his epic speeches.
Where to now, Ace?
Home.
Home?
The TARDIS.
Yes, the TARDIS. There are worlds out there where the sky's burning, where the sea's asleep and the rivers dream. People made of smoke and cities made of song. Some of there's danger, some of there's injustice, and somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Come on, Ace. We've got work to do.
Anyhow, if you like your strong female characters, I do recommend the Seventh Doctor's run. I think there are a couple of them on iTunes, I'm not entirely sure. But, yeah, his, of all the various different ones, despite the fact that the most recent classic series seem to get the worst deal in DVD releases, and digital releases, definitely, because half of his stuff that's on DVD isn't on iTunes, which is really irritating. Particularly, I'd recommend Remembrance of the Daleks, where Ace attacks a Dalek with a baseball bat. Survival, where that final clip comes from, and Curse of Fenric and Ghostlight as well. Ghostlight's another one that's a very Ace-centric story. Despite being the most confusing as hell story in Doctor Who's history, and I don't say that lightly, it was, in the original cut, so much of the sort of key exposition was left out that it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it's still entertaining. And it has a creationist turned into a monkey, which is always good fun. So yeah, do check them out, and I hope this has been helpful.